to go in with government on a tower so that everyone's on one tower. That should be more attractive to the environmentalists that are concerned, hey, I don't want to see a tower for AT&T here and then over there a tower for Verizon and a tower. Let's have fewer, maybe taller towers.
Hi there, it's WAMC News Director Ian Pickus. And on this episode of the WAMC News Podcast, we catch up with New York State Senator Dan Stec. Well, State Senator Dan Stec is a Republican from the 45th District in northern New York. He recently sat down with our North Country Bureau Chief Pat Bradley. They started by discussing invasive species.
When I was a town supervisor in Queensbury, we had a local lake there, Glen Lake, which is the lake behind the Great Escape. They had a milfoil problem. And there's about 100 homes on the lake, and it's privately owned. There was a public access. The town had a car-top boat launch there. But they wanted help combating milfoil, and they asked the town for money from the general fund. And a couple of years we did that, and then they came in one year and they asked for a lot of money. And we said, look, it's hard to justify people that don't live on the lake for helping you with your lake, your lake's milfoil problem. We'd love to help. Our attorney at the time looked into it, and they found that in state law, you can create a special taxing district to combat aquatic invasive plants. Milfoil being a plant, we're like, great, we fit the bill. We went through all the hoops, public hearings, map plan report, did the study, and engaged the people that lived there, answered all their questions. Some of them had suspicious questions, because you're talking about a taxing district. At the end of the day, though, we created the taxing district, and they got rid of their milfoil problem, and it hasn't cost them very much money. So there's nobody complaining about it. They handled the problem, and they've got great water quality again. So I was the town supervisor at the time, and it's dawned on me then, when I was in local government, if that was an invertebrate, if that was a zebra mussel problem and not a milfoil problem or an Asian clam problem like Lake George famously has right now, the town couldn't create a special district. They would have to ask the state for special legislation. Now, it's not like there's a list of towns. I don't want to mislead anyone and say their towns are banging down my door looking for this legislation, but it just struck me at the time, like, all right, you can create a taxing district to combat aquatic plant problem, but not an invertebrate problem. And that was the whole bottom line of the bill, is I wanted to do that. So I bring it into the legislature with me, and then fortunately, finally, this year, we were able to get it passed through the Senate and the Assembly. Carrie Warner from Saratoga County, she carried the bill in the Assembly for me. The Assembly had some more questions for it than the Senate did. And, I said, look, let's just make it so that it gets this done. Lawyers can, whatever the lawyers needed to say, so long as it just gives this flexibility to towns. And the governor signed it. So I'm thrilled that the governor signed it. It's a tool in the toolbox for a town board. So for any town board members that are out there, if you've got a milfoil problem, you already had this ability, if you knew it or not. If you wanted to create a special taxing district, you don't have to. But in Queensbury's case for Glen Lake, that made sense at the time, and it's worked out well. But if that, now if you also have a zebra mussel problem and you want to create a special taxing district to take care of that as your funding mechanism, again, I'm never advocating to spend more money, but the government sometimes needs to spend money to tackle a problem, and I think sometimes the taxing district is the fairest way to address a problem. And so again, it was nice for me because this was not only a bill that I authored, but it was my idea. It just makes me feel good. Like, all right, I took my local government experience, I told everyone I would, and I brought it with me to the state. And like I said, it's not solving world peace or famine, but it is another tool that towns will have to fight aquatic invasive species.
Now, this allows them to create the local taxing district. Does the bill have anything in it to perhaps get some state funding in there to help at all?
It has nothing to do with funding. It is all about the mechanisms of forming a taxing district. And again, now we're down in the weeds. Like most people, a taxing district like a water district, a sewer district, a lighting district, where if you're not on the sewer line, you shouldn't be paying a sewer tax. That's what a special taxing district is for. Similarly, if you're not on the water body, it's hard to ask people that don't live on the water body to pay for something for waterfront property owners, water quality. Again, there are exceptions where sometimes there is a public interest if it's a large public body of water like Lake George. But for these smaller lakes that all of our communities have speckled throughout the North Country, that don't have public access, but there's homes on it and they're fighting on the aquatic invasive species, passing the hat doesn't always work. You pass the hat to your neighbors. You might have one neighbor puts in $200 and you have another neighbor says, I'm not putting in any. Where's the fairness in that? So, sometimes the taxing district route is the fairest way to go about it. So, but yeah, this just allows that process to include invertebrates. So it does not provide any funding. So it did not didn't spend any money by itself.
Dan Stec, I understand you were sitting in on some environmental conservation hearings regarding bottle bills, the extended producer responsibility legislation, and the expansion of the bottle bill. What's your take on these bills?
Yep. So the key here is, that we have a laudable goal, whether it's to take bottles, drinking container waste out of the waste stream and recycle more, or in the case of the extended producer, recycling more in general. You compare New York State to other states or to other countries as to how we're doing in recycling. There's room for improvement in New York, and it's a good goal. I mean, I think that's something that everyone will say, yeah, recycling is a good thing. But we also it needs to make sense. It needs to be fair. We don't want to spend more money than we have to. We don't want to spend it wastefully. It's got to make sense. And throwing money at the problem isn't always the right solution. So, depending on how the language is written, in the case of the bottle bill, we talked about raising it to a dime. That is a tax. That is a consumer issue. That is a cost. It's regressive. It hurts lower income people more than it does higher income people. I mean, there's a fairness there. And you got the backdrop here. New York is one of the highest tax states in the country, and we're going to tax more. So can we the problem, a lot of the problems with the bottle bill is it hasn't been touched in years, and the conversion rate or the handling fee for your redemption centers hasn't gone up. It's 3.5 cents. One of the aspects of the bottle bills that are being looked at would increase that to 6 cents. So I think that can be done without increasing the deposit, because anything that is any bottles that are out there that are not returned, the state keeps that money. So last year alone, over $90 million was kept by the state and went into the general fund. So we know through our own statistics that we could increase the handling fee and not consume all that $90 million. So I think that there's going to be a compromise here. This is an old issue. It's been discussed for many, many years. So I'm not writing anything new here. I think that we could probably get where we need to improve recycling for bottles without increasing the deposit, but by changing the handling fee so that our redemption centers can operate. The redemption centers are like dairy farms. They don't set price. They can't, when their costs go up, they can't say, well, we'll just get a higher price on the milk, or they're not going to get a higher return on that bottle from they can't control that, and their costs have gone up dramatically. I mean, it's been over 30 years since the handling fee has been touched. They're losing money now, and a lot of them are going out of business, and that's something the state needs to consider. Hey, if our goal is to recycle more, we can't have redemption centers going out of business, or we're not going to have a good recycling system. So I suspect that this will get done. My fear is that it will get done as part of the budget, because frankly, this should have been handled a year ago. We're going to see more redemption centers close. So time is of the essence. I really don't want to wait till April to do this. I'd rather it have been done last year. Certainly, if it's not going to happen this year, then it should happen in January. And again, it's well-trod ground. It's not a complicated bill. It's something we could certainly do in January. And there's people on both sides of the aisle that are pushing that. Why it hasn't happened yet is an excellent question. I just hope that it doesn't get postponed and rolled into a budget negotiation, because Lord knows what it'll look like when that's over.
Senator Dan Stec, speaking of old issues, one of the issues that has been ongoing for years now is broadband in the Adirondacks. As a matter of fact, it was one of the primary issues that the Common Ground Alliance annual forum recently discussed. Making any progress at all regarding broadband?
Yeah, so broadband and cell service both have gotten better in recent years. But again, if you don't have it, It doesn't matter that your neighbor has it. I get it. But the state threw a lot of money into a public-private partnership with broadband. A lot of those contracts have been let and haven't been constructed yet. And COVID slowed some of it down, but so I think some people also need to remember that some of these projects have been approved and they have yet to be constructed. So I think it will continue to get better. Now, with that said, I think we're going to need to fund some more to get to the rest done. I know there's a lot of federal money that's been coming our way or, earmarked for New York on that front. So I do think that broadband will continue to get better. It is much better than it used to be. But it's not where it needs to be yet. And I think a similar argument, and the two go hand in hand, because the cellular they need to connect to a broadband, to a fiber optic backbone. So now that there's more broadband available, I think that will help build out the cellular network. Now, the main problem with both of these, and especially cellular, is the economies of scale. It's so rural that to build $1 million tower for a small rural population, does that investment make sense to that company? The answer, and then certainly somebody could say, well, isn't there an obligation? I mean, we managed to string electricity to the rural parts of America, and to me that is a valid and a winning argument. But I mean, we need to. How can we do this better when it comes to cellular? The government has needs for radio equipment and radio towers and and towers for communications equipment as well. I think there's an opportunity for a public-private partnership there, where maybe in our rural areas we're mandating / incentivizing the private carriers to go in with government on a tower so that everyone's on one tower. That should be more attractive to the environmentalists that are concerned, hey, I don't want to see a tower for AT&T here and then over there a tower for Verizon and a tower. Let's have fewer, maybe taller towers. I did a survey, a mailer that went out to my constituents on that subject. The overwhelming number of people said that they would be willing to have taller towers or more visible towers if it meant that they had reliable cell service. The number of people that have only cell service now and don't even have a landline is through the roof. And talking to emergency responders, when I talk to the sheriff's offices in Essex County, all of them say the vast majority of the 911 calls originate on a cell phone. So, the world is a different place than it was 20 years ago when the APA wrote their tower policy, to use that as an example. And I think that the tower policy in the Adirondack Park should reflect the new reality, which is that everyone is reliant. It's a public safety imperative that you have cell phones that work. Again, the other thing that I want to leave with the APA and the environmentalists is, look, these cell companies do not want to build any towers a single foot taller than absolutely necessary. They don't get any benefit from throwing an extra 100 feet up there. They want to do just what's necessary. And so, if they say, hey, you know what, 80 feet isn't enough for us, we need to go to 110, all right, then let's really take a hard look in the mirror and think about, am I going to have a conversation with somebody after a tragedy and said, I feel good about saying no to that 30 extra feet 10 years ago? I really think that the world is different. I'm not it's not just an APA issue, but that's the piece that we control in the park is the tower policy. But then I think the rest of it is we need a public-private partnership to involve government money to just be efficient with the spend, whether it's private dollars or public dollars. If it's private dollars, it's the ratepayers that pay it. And if it's the government, it's the taxpayers. But at the end of the day, the taxpayer and the ratepayer are the same person. So let's be smart in the investment and come up with a good system and a good solution that makes internet, broadband, cellular work for everybody in the North Country.
You are a Republican, and this is a very Republican district. It's represented by a Republican in the U.S. House. We just saw the Republicans in the U.S. House spend over 2 weeks trying to decide on a speaker. Our representative is a leader in the House Republicans. Would you have liked to see Elise Stefanik try to run for speaker?
I think I've had the pleasure of working with her and getting to know her personally for more than 10 years now. Harder worker and more intelligent person you will not meet. Not everyone may like all of our politics, but somebody that's committed to doing the job and knows what they're doing, has a head on their shoulders, whose judgment, I think is there. I think she would be a good speaker. I think, at the end, the last week of the speaker search, all the pundits on all the cable channels were saying nobody wants to be speaker. It's a hard job to do right now. No one wants it. I haven't spoken with her, so I don't know if she was truly not interested. But I also saw that a lot of the pundits, there's a lot of press that has given her a lot of credit for being above it. I mean, she took her role as, I am here to facilitate getting our conference to get to an answer. And, I read a lot of articles from across the political spectrum that said, wow, Elise Stefanik really did a great job in, I mean, as a Republican, I was very frustrated. As an American, I was very frustrated that, we don't have the third in line to the presidency is vacant for 2 weeks. I mean, that process, I was frustrated that with the 8 that decided that they were going to throw the country on its ear. I was disappointed that we were allowed to be there for 2 weeks. So it was very frustrating. I'm glad that we have a speaker. From everything that I've gathered, Mike Johnson is, somebody that certainly my side of the aisle is going to say, all right, there's a conservative thinker. He's going to do a good job as speaker, but he's certainly capable of doing the job. I mean, I think Elise would have been a good speaker. Because she is senior leadership, her name was floated early, and then it quickly stopped. So it's almost as if they said, she is not interested. Don't bug her about it anymore. She's focused on the process. And, those 200, and both parties are the same way. It's like herding cats. You have 200 people there. It's just, frustrating to me whether today it was the Republicans that had 8 rogues. A couple of years from now, it could easily be the Democrats that have a half a dozen rogues, their own squad that is, dictating terms to the majority. That's very frustrating. I mean, the squad did that a couple of years ago, not with a speaker fight, but with other legislation in the House. So it's very frustrating that a small minority can really take over an institution like that. I think it's great for the country, especially with everything that's going on in the world right now, that we have a speaker again, that the House can function, it can operate. And yes, with a narrow majority, it's very difficult, but at least it has a fighting chance to bring stuff forward and do its job. So, and from my perspective, watching that unfold with great frustration, I thought that Elise did a great job managing that conference, which a conference that size can be very unwieldy. And so I congratulate her, and I'm sure that she's relieved that she's got that done, and I hope she caught up on a little bit of sleep, because I'm sure that this has been a stressful couple weeks for her.
Well, Dan, thank you for helping me.
Absolutely. No, good to see you, Pat.
Good to see you.
Okay, that does it for this episode of the WAMC News Podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, I'm Ian Pickus.